Well, um, I'm exotic to this land because I was born in South America. I was born in Argentina, and I just want to tell you why I want to make this podcast. I came to Australia like 3 years ago in search of trying to connect with the water, with the ocean. I wanted to connect with the ocean, and I'm a filmmaker. I like to do movies. I like to tell stories. And then I met a woman. She was called Jackie. We called her Mumsy, and she inspired me a lot. I would like to say that she was my first teacher, my first nature teacher that I met here in Australia. I met her after the big bushfire season, around just before COVID started. And I remember it was pouring rain. We were like in Banjalon in Byron Bay area, and it was raining, and we were looking for shelter under the rain, and we were in a caravan park, and then this random lady, an Aussie lady from around 60, 70 years old, came and started talking about the ocean and the bushfires and the bush and the wildlife and native species. And I was just like out of my mind. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was like, oh my God, we need to tell this story. I want you to share this story to people. I want to be that channel. Eventually, we talked about the possibility of making an interview for the documentary, and things happened. COVID. I ended up living in Far North Queensland for a couple of years, and then we just didn't meet again. She was based around the sunny coast. And then in February this year, I came back to the sunny coast, and we actually talked about the possibility of interviewing her. And everything looked like it was going to happen. And the interview is going to be for a documentary, for a movie that I'm writing. And then suddenly she stopped answering the messages, and I got to know through her daughter and her son that she passed away. She left us, and I was like shocked. I was completely shocked, and I couldn't believe that I wasn't able to tell that story to be the link that connects what the message she had to say, which for me was really important. She inspired me to keep going on that direction, to keep exploring the incredible Australian wildlife and nature. And I just realized I can't wait for a movie to be done, because it's just a huge process in terms of like you write the movie, you pre-produce the movie, you produce the movie, you shoot it, you edit. It can be like 5 years, 3 years. And that's how the podcast came to an idea. And I said, I need to find another way to make it. And that's how this idea came up. And yeah, my name is Mauri, and this is Environment Art Stories. This is the name I chose for it. And we just want to tell stories about people that works in nature and lives their life with nature. And then I met another lady called Tali, which is just here. We met through some permaculture events. She is a bush regenerator. And the funny thing is that I kind of came to her workshop in a festival. We were doing some bush care and planting some trees. But the funny thing is that we were camping next to each other the whole time. And we didn't get to talk to each other much because, festivals, things are going on all the time, so you don't get to connect with people. But on the last day, when we were packing down all our stuff, there was something that caught my attention. That is that Tali she was parking down the car, and then she spotted a tree, and then she started getting out weeds out of the ground. So she was like weeding the tree. And I think it was ground lantana that you're getting at. And then you came to me and you started talking about bush regeneration. And you said, like, imagine if everyone, when they come to a festival, take care a little bit of the bush where they're camping, of that place where they're camping. Imagine how different it would be. So that's how I said, I think there's something here that I would like to explore more. I think there's a story that can be told here. And a month later, we're sitting down in your house. Thank you so much for having us here. And
it's a pleasure. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you. Thank you for having us here.
That's totally, I feel like it's kind of serendipity how we came across each other. And then, you invited me to share lunch because I had a chili that I was trying to decide what to do with as I was packing up my camp. Do you want this chili, neighbour?
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, we had already met back in the festival, but then you invited for lunch. So, it's kind of cool how things work out. And as in our journey as bush regenerators doing this project that we've been doing for over 5 years, it's been coming up more and more how we do need to make the most of this amazing networking, this mycelium of social media that's out there, podcast, documentary, YouTube videos, all this sort of thing that we dream about, just to get the stories out a little bit broader. Because bush regen is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of fringy, like we kind of hide in the bushes a little bit. We
it's not as popular as hip hop or trap or.
That's it. Yeah. And when people see people, like the fellow humans, like working in nature, it's often in parks. This is in the urban setting, at least.
Yeah.
And they've got a very different vibe on to the sort of energy that bush regenerators carry. Mm-hmm. I feel. Yeah. So we're sort of like coming out from behind the foliage a little bit today.
So can you tell us where are we now? So we're in Brisbane, of course.
Yeah,
so
Meanjin.
So, but I would like to acknowledge the.
For sure. Well, I suppose if I go back in time, Mauri, like you, I'm exotic. I wasn't born in this country, but I did move to this country from Papua New Guinea when I was 10. So, just it's not very hard to fall in love with this place, hey? Like there's so much blue sky, there's so much green forest and all the animals that call this place home as well. Really easy to connect in with this country, I feel, for me. Yeah, so I do call it home, and I feel very blessed to be living here, to call it home. And been living where we are for 16 years, me and my family. So I have a couple of kids that are more adults than kids nowadays, and my partner. And we're living with the beautiful Kedron Brook flowing past us down to the Moreton Bay. So, but the land that we're meeting on today is the land of the original peoples, Turrbal, Jagera, Yagara, and I feel also that this is a land of movement. Whenever there's water, people are moving up the waterways to the mountains, but the Jaguar ranges beyond, which is definitely a meeting place of a lot of different mobs coming together. So, in that spirit of coming together and sitting here now and sharing stories and food and tea. Yeah. And take a moment and just feel ourselves rooted into the earth here. Listening and feeling the layers of stories. Full respect to the original peoples that walked over this land and up these river systems and fished from the creeks. Made their homes along these beautiful creeks, raised their kids and looked after the country. Were nurtured by this country and are still nurtured by this country, and in return they nurture the country. You know, they look after their mother. So pay respects to that, the First Nations.
Thank you for that. And I've noticed, because I speak Spanish, that's my native language, but I've noticed when I learned English that in Australia we use country in a different way that other English-speaking countries use. Like when you speak about country, what do you mean? You mean like the borders, the country itself? This is just to explain to someone that doesn't live in Australia. What is country?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting term, isn't it? Because it's like you say, the English countryside is like, oh, imagine, you know, instantly you have this flash of Jane Austen or something, I don't know. But country here, or maybe country everywhere, if people stop and really listen and get their roots down, is it's mother, you know, like it's the layers of relation to between all the animals and fungi and plants living on this land. So country is culture and it's rich. Country is, when we talk about caring for country, taking my learnings here from the Indigenous worldview, you know, which is, I was going to say it's easy to tap into, but it's easy to begin to grasp, but how much of tapping into is, it's all relative. So country is more than just the land and the forest and the ocean. It's a cultural kind of meaning. So it's the health of the country and the health of the people is a direct link. So we have to look after country and to look after ourselves. And it's a beautiful, beautiful reciprocal relationship. It's our responsibility.
Yeah. So you say you were born in Papua New Guinea, and how that happened? Because where's your ancestors from?
Well, Emisaplang PNG. My mum and dad moved up there in the very early 70s or late 60s.
They from Australia?
But on mum's side, at least, dad's side goes back a bit further. They were brewers and missionaries back, I'm not sure how far back, but come from Europe, from I think England and Scotland and things like that. But so far back, there's probably been all sorts of stories. That side of the family hasn't been fully explored. On mum's side, they've come out in the war. My grandmother and grandfather met during World War II. And Oppa, he's Hungarian and Mama is Polish. And they were on opposing sides. You know, both of those countries were being oppressed by the bigger powers, the bigger countries. And so they came together. Oppa didn't speak a little bit of Polish, so just as well. My grandmother, she was fairly multilingual, and they fell in love during the height of this wartime. And
so they met here.
No, they
met there.
Met in a little cafe, and somewhere. Can't remember exactly, but yeah, during the war. And so they were refugees for 7 or more years, and they raised kids during that time. And then they finally were able to make passage on a boat in 1949. And in her belly, Mama was carrying my mum. So they arrived here in Australia. And then a couple of months later, Mum was born down in Newcastle. So, yeah, both of my parents are from that kind of New South Wales. Dad's from more rural country. But they met in Sydney, and Dad had the opportunity to go up to Papua New Guinea after his architecture degree, because he was being sponsored by the Australian government to study. So they said, now you have to pay back your uni fees, and they posted him up there to Papua New Guinea, and they were there for 20 years and raised all us kids.
How many?
I'm one of 8. Yeah. So big family. Yeah. My youngest brother was born when we migrated back down here in 1989.
How this connection with the bush came? Like, were you a kid that liked to explore in nature, or it just came from somewhere else?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we lived in the suburbs up there, relatively speaking, but we had coconut trees and, crazy garden kind of thing that we would just... I remember digging a pool, which was, in time for the wet season, so it was basically squatting in a mud puddle. And we're like, woo, we got a pool. Yeah. That sort of thing. And then on the weekends, we would always be going picnicking and exploring up in the outer sort of bushland areas or jungle. We just got a jungle up there of PNG, of Moresby. So, yeah, Mum and Dad even had a little block of land up on Hombrams Bluff, and so it was beautiful looking out, big waterfalls and brown rushing rivers where there was probably crocodiles, but we were kids. We'll just, you just swim in the rapids, so don't go to the still.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So pretty lush. And then also they had a boat, they had a little, I think 28-foot skiff. So, yeah, we'd go sailing every second weekend, so exploring the reefs all around Lion Island and Lalawata, and just had our snorkels on all day, our masks and snorkels, and just swimming with the coral and finding cool stuff.
Ocean passion as well.
Oh, big time, yeah. And then when you get out of the ocean, then you're on this island, so then you're just,
do you
walking around
often go
the
to the
island.
ocean now? Oh, not really? You spend most of the time among the trees?
To me, it's like, medicine, I need to be there. I really feel it calling. That's one bummer about living in Brisbane, is that you're an hour's drive from the ocean at least. So, yeah, but we do like to go throw ourselves into the big washing waves, and it's so cleansing. Hey, it's just so... I feel at home. And I think that's deeper than, my childhood. I think that, the ancestry, the fact that we came from...
On a boat?
No, I'm talking about billions of years ago. When
okay.
Yeah. we kind of crawled out of the ocean, right?
Oh, yeah, we're talking like millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, it feels good, though, to come back to that place and get washed around, like just kind of... Yeah, surrender, I suppose, is a big part of it, and elemental as well. It's just the ocean and the...
So you have a good relationship with water. Do you get seasick on the ocean?
As a kid, I didn't used to, but now as I'm getting older, even when I go swimming sometimes in the surf, I just body surf. I have surfed on boards, but I'm most comfortable body surfing. But yeah, I don't know, it's weird. Just all of a sudden, as I'm getting older, feeling like I'm only swimming, but
probably you're becoming a tree, that's why.
Yeah, somebody told us something to do with this little gland in the back of our head that loses its
I don't know what is it.
flexibility,
I get seasick.
elasticity.
I mean, I'm a diving instructor, but I think it's because I didn't spend my childhood in the ocean. So I started like as an adult. So sometimes I get sick, but it just has no explanation. But yeah, I'm always curious about that. I'm always asking, like, you get seasick? It's like, what is it?
Yeah, I
feel
know.
more comfy on land, though. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a journey there to explore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I imagine if you're swimming along and all of a sudden it's nearly like you have this little trigger in your body that says, hey, I've lost my groundings, my bearings, or my gravity, you know, like maybe we're creatures of gravity.
So why Brisbane? I mean, we're in Brisbane. We're in the middle of the city.
Meanjin is
Meanjin.
Yeah.
And we can't tell that we're in the middle of the city because I can see from here there's like a garden and there's like creek and bush. So you're like close to nature. But why here? Why? Because that's one of the things that caught my attention, because these guys, they know a lot about the bush. They have a lot of knowledge. They work in the bush. But they do it in the middle of the city, so that caught my attention. So it can be done anywhere.
That's true. I guess, you know, we're calling this place home for now. And part of that decision was because of the grandparents. When we were, you know, had our first kid, like, oh, it's lovely for the grandparents to look after it so we can... just to keep that family connection strong and knowing that there's family around to support us in the journey of family, raising kids. So, both of our folks live relatively close in the north side Brisbane, north side Meanjin. And, it doesn't stop me having itchy feet though. Like, I've done a little bit of travelling and I'm just feeling more and more, hey, I've only got one life. I've really got to, think about what I'm doing with it. I see old people walking down the street through these city streets and I'm like, I don't want to be that. I want to make sure that I have, like, do some more wild things before I'm past. So, Brisbane's home for now. And the beautiful thing about this place is that there is a lot of bush around here.
Oh, yeah, it's...
The rivers, and I think it's because of the geography. Well, it is because of the geography. We've got a mountain range just to the northwest of us here. And one of my favourite places is actually up there. I'll take you when it's warmer. Yeah. It's just a little waterhole with a cascading waterfall, but it's round. It's beautiful.
Well, one of the things that surprised me the most of Australia is that there's bush everywhere. Like every single city, even Sydney, which is pretty big, and Brisbane as well, they have national parks, like kind of like in hidden spots. So to drive to a national park is just like maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and they're pretty taken care of. So that was really good to know and really good to meet, which is not the same in the place where I was born.
Yeah.
Like, to go to a pristine place, you probably need to drive a couple hours if you're in the city. So I was amazed by that in Australia. I feel that Australian people have that connection with nature and they don't even notice that, like, they were born and raised that way. So I want to ask you a question, and it's coming back a little bit to the bush regen. Why native plants or native species are important? What's the importance of them?
Yeah, and this relates to your previous question about why are we doing bush regen in the middle of the city? When you're working in the bush and you become aware of all the natural spaces, you also become aware of the built-up environment around it, like the hardenings of the ground, so all of the tarmac and footpath and houses and highways and train lines and mobile phone towers, and even though there's a lot of bush, there is a lot of trees. Anytime you're driving through Brisbane, you'll always be able to spot a chunk of green in trees or through the creek systems. And their life, they're like little nests of life for birds and insects and reptiles and, just the little guys that just get on and live their lives, into the microbes in the soil. So, but there's a pressure there from all sides in any city environment, pollution through the air, through the water, the, plastic and the other sort of hard rubbish stuff that comes flowing through in flood times and otherwise, wind days. So, yeah, it feels really necessary, actually, to treat these green spaces with, like, respect and care, because there's guys living in there. They didn't ask for highways and houses and people with their various chemicals, to be near them. So I think it's like that taking notice, when you do bush regen, you start to really observe. You come into more of a close focus with the natural world, and then you start to see and question and be curious about all the little critters living in there and the fungi as well. And then the plants themselves, it's like this plant has always been here. It wasn't planted.
Yeah.
And through all of this invasion and colonization and hardening and, modernization, and they're still here, right? There's got a deep seed bank under the bitumen and all of that. So we need to really start sitting up and not just paying attention, but actioning that making that respect and transform into, we call it regeneration, restoration, or a lot of different terms you can use, caring for country.
What's practically, because I feel that there's going to be a lot of people listening or watching this and they don't know what's bush regeneration. So what's bush regeneration? Okay.
Well, the bush is regenerating all the time, even without us. Regeneration, it happens in our cells. It's that continuation of life. Okay, so when we use the term bush regeneration as humans with our tools and our techniques and our active observation, probably more specifically, we could say assisted bush regeneration, like we're assisting the bush to regenerate itself.
So that's your role?
That's my role. Yeah. I'm an assistant to nature. Yeah. Some people would call it bush restoration. So, and that's actually another level of restoring where it wasn't once. So if you're talking about a paddock and some of our clients, landholders say, I want a rainforest, and you're staring out at this sort of paddock or arid space or degraded, that becomes more restoration. So you're actually having to bring plants in, because humans aren't very patient.
I know. Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yeah. They want the rainforest now, It's like, hang on. Maybe your great-great-grandkids will be in the rainforest. But it's great that people are starting to have that awareness and have that impetus for action. And people want the rainforest. They don't know how to have the rainforest. They might look at some books or do some Googling or go to their nursery, but I suppose they will ask for help. They will give us a call because having spent decades in the bush and over a decade actively regenerating the bush, we've come to understand a lot about plant communities, and it's pretty powerful, actually, learning your local I don't mean powerful in an ego way, but it really gives you a agency to act, because, you know, when you look out at the wattle, you go, okay, you understand inherently what that acacia, that wattle, is doing there, you know, and who habits on the wattle, like the different bees and the butterflies and the birds that will come, because you've seen the galahs coming in. They're the pink and grey birds. They're pretty noisy. They'll come in and they'll have a quiet feed of this particular wattle. And you know that the ants are actually wattle farmers. So you see the ants crawling up the trunk and they eat the seeds. They carry the seeds, which have this like juicy flesh around the outside of them. They carry them back down or maybe they'll get them off the ground after it's fallen. It's probably more accurate. They'll carry them back to their nest under the ground and they'll nibble off the aril, the juicy part, and they've just planted another acacia. So they're like the wattle farmers.
Okay.
And then there's the whole fungal communities and then the saps that come through the acacia that feeds other animals, including humans. You know, we can use that as bush chewing gum and medicinally as well. So, yeah, you just build up this whole story around this one tree. And then that's even before you start thinking about the chemistry of the tree, like the fact that it's a legume. And I'll just go on a tangent. I'm a real plant nerd, right? Yeah. So, there's like over 1,000 acacia species worldwide. And we've got over 700.
Is that a native tree from this area?
It's just out there at the window, yeah. It's telling me to tell the story, you see.
Is that a native from this area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's over like 700 species in Australia, and there's over 100 species that's local to here in this region. So they're a pretty good place to start if you want to do some active regeneration, because you get, the nitrogen fixing in the soil, the various insects that enjoy and assist the wattle tree to grow stronger, more robust. They're just really tough as well. They can handle.
Not even speaking of all the benefits that trees come and they bring with them. Like reducing pollution as well and mental well-being as well, and they're also awesome. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They bring a lot of colour into our lives.
Do you think, or do you know, if invasive species or exotic species have a role as well?
Yeah, if you were to ask the soil, ask the dirt and the microbes that live there, they're like, cool, we'll take it. You know, if you've got like roots, rhizomes, fungal networking going on underground, the more it seems, the better, you know.
Because
just on that note though, it's good to note that when we talk about mycelium and the like, there are invasive species of mycelium from overseas that are actually detrimental to the soil. So, you know, everything's a balance, and it's all about us learning through observation and learning from each other through, you know, resources, conversation about, just learning the story so that we can keep the soil rich. But when you talk about are invasive species beneficial, I suppose one driving, one motivator for me around bush regeneration and, you know, doing hours of weeding in my daily and weekly and monthly, yearly life is that we are about observing, understanding and respecting the plants that have evolved with this particular soil, this particular region. And before we were talking about the pressures of the compounding by humans, and humans will bring the weed seed, and these weedy species they'll come to this country and the soil's different. It's like exciting and they can proliferate here, and they haven't sort of built up that relationship with the soil, the same as the native species have. I always call them local species. So there's this reciprocity, which is like chemical, and also the relationship with the local fauna hasn't been built up over evolution, you know? So we just want to we want to assist the local species, the local plant species, to breathe a little, because a lot of the weedy species that come in can be quite dominant. And, you know, they can form dense thickets and monocultural forest, or if it's a vine, it can just go like smother all these kind of more chill local species that are like, yeah, this is our place, you know. They're a bit more relaxed about being at home. So the smothering effect happens. And then with that, you tend to lose the local biodiversity as far as butterflies and birds and other animals being able to habit in there. I mean, animals are much quicker to adapt, I have to say. You know, the smaller the animal, the easier it seems that they adapt to change, okay? So a lot of let's take the little Zizula hylax. That's a little tiny pencil blue butterfly. Its local species is Karamat or Hygrophila. But now you'll find it in big thickets of Discarista, which is it's only been in this region for 2 decades, and it's spreading really profusely. Like it's sort of taking over. It's a ground cover. It's a herb, and so it can come up to this high, but people mow it. So it loves the lawns and the parks. And so this little butterfly now calls the Discarista home. And so it's always about when we are tipping the balance back towards more local biodiversity, we need to consider that. We need to consider that the little butterfly that's now adapted to the weedy species, where's that going to live, and how's that going to keep on regenerating in its way?
So there's been, I assume that nature is just so incredible, and there's so many, because you speak a lot about little things, so we don't even know what's going on, like all the little particles and animals and insects and things that are happening in every single section of the nature. So what I can feel is like there's also been weeds. So when you say weeds, you're referring to plants or species that they're not local, right? That they got to adapt themselves and that they're part of the local, because everything's been part of like a constant change as well. That's right? True. So maybe a weed now, it won't be a weed now, it'll be local in thousands of years or... Yeah,
naturalized, they call it. Yeah.
So how incredible is that?
It's pretty awesome to be part of that journey. Yeah, and we have to keep remembering that nothing is static, and it's a changing story. So all these books behind me, some of them are like, Weeds of the Southeast or something, and you look in that, and that sort of that selection of weeds might have been current when that book was published, but it's whether through human eradication or just the changing conditions or new weeds coming in, like that's kind of outdated. But it's still interesting to reference back to those older texts and resources, because it gives you a deeper story, deeper understanding of how the plant has come to be here, how it's come to evolve, how humans have impacted that, and where it is today. So
it's a delicate subject, I feel. Like it's really delicate. You as a bush assistant, right? It's not that you can come in and disrupt everything, right?
That's right. And I feel like a big part of our journey is storytelling and enlightening our clients or people that want to learn and listen to the fact that, weeds are not the enemy. They're not bad. They're not even weeds. They're plants. Like
exactly, because when you're weeding, you're taking weeds out.
Yeah.
But they're plants.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel it's delicate.
Yeah.
I mean, you're actually getting plants out of the soil. So you're ending the life in a point, some weeds. But you are doing that because you have a higher purpose. Like you have a motive, a reason to do it, which is protect and regenerate and give space to the local plants to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very delicate subject, and it definitely keeps us on our toes in an ethical sense as well. Because when you create natural disturbance by, removing a plant and the roots disrupt the soil structure, you're part of the issue, part of the problem of erosion, and but humans can justify anything, hey?
So do you feel that this is a knowledge that should be like everyone can know about it? Like, should we get to know a little bit more of our local species?
Absolutely.
Like wherever we live? Or do you think it's like a technique stuff? You know what I mean?
Bit of both. Yeah, I really feel like primarily, inherently, learning your local is key to caring for country. So if you just have a, 2 metre by 2 metre square in your front garden, just start observing it. Start watching what animals come and visit. Start looking at the soil. Start looking at the tiny little plants that are growing in the cracks of the pavement. And you'll find that some of them are like, have always been here, and when they're given half a chance, that they can bring more local species with their pollinators, and the pollinators can bring seed from other plants. So you can create a forest just starting with a little ground cover if you've got the time. Or if you have
your patience.
Yeah. Yeah, there's these 3 words that I learned about years ago. I was trying to understand a particular weedy species. So we like to remind our clients just back on that thing about weeds are bad. Weeds are weeds in the definition it's a subjective definition. So yeah. So sorry, I just lost my
the 3 words?
The 3 words, thank you. There's a particular one that is very persistent because it has tubers, and the tubers grow on the stem. The tubers grow on where the stem and the leaf meet. So if a leaf drops off, the tuber will, all the nutrients from that leaf will swell up in the tuber, and then the tuber is ready to go. It's like a tiny seed in a tuber already. And if you have and they're quite fleshy and soft. So when you shake the stem off the vine, you just get showered upon by anyway, it's a really persistent one. So
That's the type of weed.
That's a type of weed.
What's the name of that?
It's called Madeira.
Madeira, yeah. You mentioned that before.
Yeah, and Rhetora cordifolia. Yeah. And you can eat the leaf, actually.
Yeah.
So it's helpful if you're hungry. Fry it up. Apparently it's good. I've only had a little taste. But I was trying to understand it and go, well, how am I going to, reduce it in my backyard or get rid of it? The 20 years, it's like a 20-year journey with one plant. And patience, consistency, determination. So that's like a little mantra that I can say to myself and anyone else that's dealing with Madeira. Not just Madeira, but there's other vines and we call them tough ones or tough weeds or tough plants, the ones that are really, they know they've got their roots in, they've got their claws, they've got their reproductive capacities that are just like beyond our scope of management. Yeah. Chemical or not chemical, like they've evolved to a point where they're just ready to, dominate, domineer. Yeah.
I That's funny. Could you do something else, like for a living? Because you said when you were a kid, you liked to explore the bush and walk in nature, but from doing that as a lifestyle to actually working in the bush, could you be something else?
I'm not sure.
really.
That's a good question. I did study science. Like I've got medical science background, and I loved biology and chemistry and that. So, but that's a very inside life. Yeah, so I could probably go down that track as long as there was a lot of field work in that. Also, humans, caring for humans. I think I'm just a maintenance guy at the end of the day. I like to maintain things. So I've done a lot of disability support work in my time as well. So just, keeping things ticking along and alleviating stress out of the world. That's what I think I like to do. In an alternate reality, I have a fantasy about being a librarian, just surrounding myself with books and knowledge.
You have a good start here.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to rearrange them. No, it's I like the quiet of libraries and just that sort of, you're like in this home of all these stories and layers of history and things like that. But outside, you're also in a home of stories and layers of history and research and people's inputs and animals' inputs. And so that's more dynamic, that's more three-dimensional and four-dimensional.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So to tell a bit more about Tali and what she's doing. So Tali created bushtekniq, which is an organization that works regenerating the bush with your brother, Jono, and also Jono's partner, Anna. And so we'll leave the links and all the information for the people who wants to know more about the organization and get engaged or see what you're doing, what's your work, on the description of the video or the podcast.
For sure.
Yeah,
I'd recommend checking out our Insta page more than Facebook. We're not good at Facebook.
We'll leave all those links there, don't worry. But
it's it's a bit of a project that we started really in...
How long ago?
Around 7 years ago officially.
Yeah.
So we both started as subcontractors for council, and so we learned the ropes of regen throughout the river systems of Brisbane. There are so many rivers and creeks through here. It's just so beautiful, it really is. And so local to anyone. That's why it's so cool. Anyone can do bush regen, honestly. Like, it's just walk down to your end of your street or into your local waterway. Just go to your local park, and there's stuff to learn. And there's like all these bushtekniq groups around Brisbane as well. So we kind of had mentors that worked alongside us, but pretty quickly in that little company that we were working for, we were left to our own devices. It's like, can you just weed for the next 8 hours or whatever it was? And so we had a lot of time to explore and observe, and I'd use the word play, but no, it really is. Nature play. It's part of, like, you're engaged, you're alive, your senses are all awake. Your senses
are really awake. Well, we've been doing. I came a couple of days before to see what you guys were doing and been practicing a little bit. And you actually need to be like, your senses needs to be awake. Like plant ID is way more difficult than I thought.
Really?
It's like, they all look like, if you don't pay attention, they kind of look the same, the ones that you need to get rid of and the ones that you need to protect.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
It was really
difficult. You got to look for the wavy leaf and the leaves that are a little bit more shiny.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're a bit more gritty, like you have to feel them with your skin.
Yeah.
Or smell them, like crushed smell. Like, you actually have to. For some of them, they're so similar.
It's a conscious activity as well. You're in the bush, you're just paying it. If you pay attention enough, if you're observing, as you said, it's like there's so many things going on.
Yeah.
So many things, animals and birds and the water, and it's just incredible. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just were working through the different waterways in Brisbane. We were lucky to have, you know, the different ecological communities to gain experience with. And then every time we were asked to use chemicals, herbicide, it's just like a little bottle of poison, you know, no harm. Got some pink dye in it, and you just put it on this little plant, you know, cut and paint.
So you guys don't do that?
Well, back in the day when we were learning, we were asked to do it, and it didn't take very long at all for us to go, like, we'd be like, oh, it just didn't feel right, you know. Inherently, it was just like, why are we bringing poison into this nature, like into this natural bush where there's all these tiny little animals and birds coming in to eat them, and it would just confound us every time. So we just stopped using it. Like our boss would say, oh yeah, you know, do glyphosate, this hillside of Ochna. And then we would just go, what if we don't?
So that's important, because that's I think that's really important to mention, that all your work is chem-free. So you don't use any chemical. You just use your hands and your knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah,
like an animal.
Perspective. Yeah.
Like you act like an animal. You disturb the nature a little bit, but not in a human way.
That's it. We keep the chemical companies out of the bush.
Yeah, that's
and
good to know.
And that was the whole impetus for starting bushtekniq. So we rapped about it in the bush for ages. Like, what are we going to call ourselves? And so we've got a whole little history of, you know, beatboxing and rapping in the undergrowth. And then finally we come across bushtekniq, and we're like, okay, because the other part of the puzzle is that all these people walking past on their footpaths and you know, going to the edge of the footpath and saying to us, you guys are doing a great job. Have you seen any snakes? And, you know, kind of like peering off into the bush like they were other from nature. Mm-hmm. And we're like, that's not true. That, you know, they're part of the nature. They're part of breathing this air that the trees are making fresh for them. And
snakes?
No. The humans walking past.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, on their daily exercise routine. Yeah. Or they'd be jogging past going, you guys are doing a great job. And we're like, you know, you can be fit if you pick up a tool and
join us. Yeah. We need a little bit help here.
Yeah, exactly. So we realised that the people don't necessarily understand that they have the
power.
They can be empowered. They can find the agency to be part of the health of their local. So a big part of our work is actually around education and awareness, knowledge sharing, storytelling. So yeah, it's been amazing like that.
That's why we're doing this.
True.
To share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big, broad audience out there.
The other thing that I've noticed that is really cool, that you don't get all that material that you get out, all that organic material. You don't take it. You find a way to leave it there as well, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you do that? Like briefly.
Sure. We basically create compost heaps in the bush. Mm-hmm. So first up, we would rather not collect at all. Like, we pull it out and we put it back on the soil, because the soil needs to cover. Mm-hmm. It needs that stability. The weedy species that was growing there has pulled all that nutrient out of the soil to become the plant. So just by pulling it out and dropping it, chop and drop, they call it in permaculture. Yeah. Culture, we call it pull and drop, because we want to get it out by the roots.
Because you don't do it with machete.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some different tools. It's pretty cool. But yeah, sometimes we will chop, because the roots are, you know, the particular spot is too prone to erosion, or we just want to get it quick because it's coming into flower or coming into seed. We want the flower so that the pollinators can do their thing, but then before it matures seed, then you can just chop it. So, so we like to leave it right where we found it, ideally, to create that mulch layer, feed it back into the system. And if the particular species is we know more about how much it reproduces or whatever, we might collect it up. Same the Madeira, we'll collect up the nodules and then we'll put them in one place. Same with the Discaristia, when it's in seed, we'll put it all in one place. So create little compost heaps around in the bush. Mm-hmm. And then to accelerate that composting process further, sometimes we'll use plastic or we can use other things. We're innovating with hessian and, reused stuff, because the idea of plastic in the bush is also like very weird. Mm-hmm. But yeah, effectively we're just keeping the nutrient in that place. Yeah.
So feeding back the soil means like you give that organic material is going to decompose in a compost and give all those nutrients to the ground again and regenerate.
That's right. It. And feed all the microbial life. Like we've got to look after the soil, like all of the life in that soil, all the fungal mycelial networks. Mm-hmm. There's an amazing mycologist who's local, Dr. Frances Gard, and her mantra is "Let logs lie." That we've got this big thing about mulch. Got to chop a tree down and then mulch it up, and make it all like high kind of interference. But there's all these networks going on that we're completely unaware of, or we have a minimal awareness of. And when you mulch up a tree with a chipper, like you're destroying all these fungal networks that are inherent to the health of that particular bush. So the messier, the better, and that's a really big thing for people to get their head around. Mm-hmm. Messy.
So organic material is good to put it back in the ground. Yeah. Don't put it in the bag and put it in the bin. Yeah. It's way better to feed it back, to find a way to feed it back.
That's right. Yeah. And just like leave things dangling and things like that, because it keeps the humans out and dogs and cats that might predate on the little creatures. But also, there's lots of creatures that like to have a entanglement. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it just comes about from observance, long-term observation, and having these little aha moments when you're working in the bush and, oh my gosh, you see a nest in this sort of tangle of, tall grasses, and you're like, okay, I've got to remember that.
So we're getting to the end of the interview, but I would like to propose you to do a little action. So the idea of this podcast is not only, as a filmmaker, I always felt like, well, we make the films about nature, but what do we do? Like, do we get our hands dirty? So we talked about doing something today. So we've been working the last few days, but it'll be good also to... So what are we going to do today? Are we going to get our hands dirty? Are we going to learn a little bit of bush regen? Can you tell us what we're going to do? Talk is cheap. Let's get some action.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the section is going to be called A la Pacha. Which Pacha, means earth. So it's back to earth. So
beautiful.
We not only going to tell stories about nature, but we're also going to get engaged in an activity where we can give back to earth as well. So tell us a bit of what we're going to do in a couple of minutes. Okay.
Well, we're all going to get our hands dirty.
Yeah, sign operator and camera operator as well.
Yeah, you excited? I am. I'm stoked to have you guys coming over to my little backyard, little home patch here, to share some of what I've learned over the years. Plants that have just arrived of their own accord, like local species that have just like popped up. And then, of course, the weedy species that come downstream, and we'll learn a bit about them. So we'll do some observation. We'll do a little bit of weeding out of the plants that are more domineering. And then we might finish up the day as well as having food and fire and some good times, because it's all about food. When you're a bush regenerator, it really is about food.
I think whatever you do.
Yeah. But it's fun to think about the bush as a bit of like a
There's heaps of
pantry or
food in
something.
the bush
supermarket.
in Australia. Yeah,
That's it.
bush foods.
Yeah. So we'll be looking for some of them, and then we'll be planting up some more, because living on a creek in this part of the world, we were we were part of the flood that happened, right? We had like, I don't know how many meters, but it was high. I can show you.
Yeah, to put it in context, it's just been a period of time in Australia where it's been raining. And
back in March 2022.
Yeah.
Huge waters came through this country, and I lost like the creek lost 3 or 4 meters of bank, so probably about 5 to 8 years worth of bush regen, like for me. I was like, what? Big change. So we're recovering from that. Like 3 months on, we're still pruning trees and propping trees. And
But you've also been working, because all your neighbours, there's a creekside here, so you've been planting trees along the years, because you mentioned something about that. Yep. So just even in my own local neighbourhood, chatting to my neighbours, and we all love this where we live. So, we've been doing some planting days. There's a pair of black cockatoos that nest over the creek every year. They come down the creek system and nest in this beautiful old eucalypt over there. And so we were planting up some casuarinas, which is their food. So I can show you a big old tree that I planted for them about 8 or 9 years ago. And then we planted some fresh ones just 2 weekends ago. And and that's really cool to think that their babies will come and get a feed from our efforts in the years to come. Yeah, they're a really beautiful bird. So and I'm really excited to show you guys the creek that we live on and give back. So we have I have a gift from a river system just over the range. When you look over off the back veranda, you can see the Yogra range, and beyond that is Yogra Creek, and that flows out to Maui, Brisbane River. And when we were working there on Friday, you were there. See this little, it's actually a big seed. It's just so funky. It's like, I'll better describe it for your listeners. It's like a single seed, probably the size of a avocado pip or a golf ball or something like that. It's got brown and a brown shell, but it's quite lime green underneath, soft lime green. And it's encased in a seed pod that's all velvet, but also corduroy as well. And it's got the cutest little curl on the end of the seed pod. And we found the mother vine that it came from. It's Calaria megasperma, so big seed, literally, or native wisteria. So, it'll have a beautiful flower. Are we going to plant this today?
Yeah, we're going to plant that today.
Oh, I love that. That's our action.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that, I hope our word flies far and deep for people to realise that they're part of this great change, and part of that is bush regen.
Observing. And then getting hands dirty.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mauri.
Darling. Well done.
Okay.
Let's do some action.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, guys.